All right, today we're tackling a big one. We're going to dive into this really fascinating study that basically turned decades of conventional wisdom about the stock market completely on its head. So think about it. This is the ultimate high-stakes question for any country, right? If you get it right, you can unlock incredible prosperity. But if you get it wrong, well, trust disappears and the whole thing can crumble. And for years, the world's top financial experts were pretty sure they had the answer. You see, the dominant idea was that the best cop on the beat for the market was the market itself. The thinking was just give investors the power to sue companies that do wrong, make sure companies are disclosing information, and voila, the system will police itself. Government regulators, they were seen as kind of secondary, maybe not even all that important. But then along came two researchers, Howell Jackson and Mark Rowe, and they looked at this whole setup and thought, something just doesn't add up here. They had a hunch that the real story was a lot more complicated, and they decided to go looking for a totally new kind of evidence. Okay, so before we get to what they found, let's really dig into the theory they were up against. For a long time, the view promoted by huge institutions like the World Bank was that private enforcement was the real engine of a successful market. And this wasn't some fringe idea, This was the prevailing belief. It was simple. Give private citizens the legal tools they need to keep companies in line. The thinking was that government regulators were just too slow, too inefficient, or too bogged down in bureaucracy to get the job done right. So you basically had these two teams in the ring. On one side, you've got Team Private, where the heroes are individual investors with their lawsuits and strict disclosure rules. And on the other side, you have Team Public, starring the government watchdogs like the SEC. For decades, pretty much all the smart money was betting on Team Private. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. How did the old studies even try to measure public enforcement? Well, they'd create these big checklists based on the formal powers a regulator had on paper. Could they launch an investigation? Could they issue fines? Could they bring criminal charges? It was all about what the law books said they could do. But Jackson and Rowe came along with this game-changing insight. They realized that maybe everyone had been asking the wrong question all along. And here it is. This is the absolute heart of their argument. What good are all these super strong laws if the agency in charge has a tiny budget and a skeleton crew of employees? It's such a powerful and frankly obvious question that had somehow been overlooked. I absolutely love this analogy because it just makes everything click. The first police department has immense formal power, but almost no resources. The second one has real on-the-ground capacity to actually get things done. The researchers suspected that when it comes to financial markets, the number of detectives and the size of the lab matter a whole lot more than the rulebook. It's a no-brainer. And that's what led them to coin this new term, resource-based enforcement. It's a whole new way of looking at a regulator's true strength. Forget the law books for a second. They wanted to look at the checkbooks and the staff lists. And their method was just brilliant in its simplicity. They went from country to country and just started collecting the data. Step 1. How many people actually work for the securities regulator? Step 2, what's their annual budget? This gave them a direct, concrete way to measure a country's real commitment to public enforcement. So now they've got this totally new data, this new lens to look through. They were ready to put the old theory to the test. And well, what they found was kind of mind-blowing. So check this out. This was the first major clue they found. On this chart, every single dot is a country. As you go from left to right, the regulator's staff gets bigger. And that trend line, it shows a crystal clear positive link. More staff is associated with a bigger, more valuable stock market. And it wasn't a one-off either. When they plotted the regulator's budget against how much trading was happening in the market, they found the exact same pattern. More money for the public watchdog was strongly connected to a more active, more robust stock market. You could really see the story starting to come together. Okay, so this was the moment of truth. They decided to put all these different ideas, the old ones and their new one, head to head in what they called a statistical horse race, to see which one was actually the best predictor of a healthy market. And the results? Whoa, they were a total shock to the system. As you can see in this table, public enforcement, when measured by real resources, was a rock-solid, consistently significant predictor of market health. So was disclosure. But the real bombshell was private liability. That's the power for investors to sue. Turns out it was often insignificant, and sometimes it even looked like it had a negative impact. The old idea that lawsuits were the key was suddenly on some very, very shaky ground.
So what's the big deal? I mean, why does any of this academic stuff matter in the real world? Why should we care about this statistical horse race?
Because this isn't just a debate for economists in an ivory tower. For years, developing countries were being told by major world institutions to focus their energy on building a legal system for private lawsuits. This research suggests that advice might have been, well, incomplete, or maybe even flat out wrong. Building a well-funded, well-staffed public regulator might be just as important, if not more so.
So let's just boil it all down. What are the big takeaways here? First, real resources, boots on the ground and money in the bank matter way more than just having tough-sounding rules written down somewhere. Second, a trustworthy market seems to need a real public watchdog with teeth and the budget to back it up. And third, private lawsuits, on their own, they're just not the magic bullet everyone thought they were.
And all of that leaves us with a really important question for today. The research is pretty clear about what works. It shows that investing in public oversight really does pay dividends when it comes to market health and public trust. So the question we have to ask ourselves now is, are we actually making that investment? Are today's watchdogs really getting the resources they need to do their jobs?